Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with everybody here today. First off, I thought it would make some good sense to let everybody know a little bit about Lloyd's Register. Many people aren't familiar with Lloyd's Register. They typically think of Lloyd's Banking or Lloyd's Insurance. As it happens to be, all three of those were founded out of the same coffee house at the same time. There was a nice interplay between insurance, banking, but then what Lloyd's Register does, which is assurance. How do you know that something is fit for purpose? How do you know that a ship is built appropriately to carry a certain cargo? So in some ways, when you think of Lloyd's Register, it's really been a data company from 2.5 centuries ago. A couple of points that differentiate us. We are owned, well, there's essentially two arms: a foundation, which is focused on education and safety, which play well with our clientele. But then there's also the commercial arm, and the commercial arm feeds revenues back into the foundation. And so we have a little bit more of a long-term view. We're not driven by stockholders per se, but we are keen on increasing our revenues. So over the course of the last, I guess it was about 3.5 years ago, there was a strategy refresh at Lloyd's Register where we said, okay, look, how do we ramp up revenues, still serve our clients, but not necessarily have it tied strictly to just headcount and services. So we started to employ a few different strategies around technology and trying to digitize some of that early data that was collected. For reference on data, just to verify that I'm not making it up, if you go all the way back and you look at, there's a book called Lloyd's Register Blue Book. And again, that's 2.5 centuries old, but in there, we would go on to different ships, whether it be a passenger ship or a cargo ship, and essentially collect the data and verify, again, that it was fit for purpose. So we have a lot of data that we'd like to digitize, and we also happen to have quite a few folks with really deep technical expertise, and we'd like to be able to capture that knowledge. As you know, in the workforce, they talk about, in particular in operations and maintenance, that a number of our skilled engineers, I think somewhere on the order of 60% of them will be retiring over the course of the next 5 years. And that's a big blow in terms of knowledge base. Where does Lloyd's Register operate? Really, it's quite interesting to me. Anything from the drill bit going into the seabed to the nozzle going into your fuel tank, and everything in between. Again, they're going out, making sure that something's fit for purpose, and then if it is, they will issue a certificate. Sometimes that's an ISO certificate. Maybe if it's food and beverage, it'll be something else. But ensuring that everything is to standard. So if you think about it, we're actually trying to help enforce best practices, and one of the best ways to do that is to have the data to be able to reflect what is the best practices, what are the best practices. In terms of areas, we've historically had 3 primary business units: marine and offshore, BAIS, which is business assurance and inspection services. So again, think of food and beverage, going in and inspecting suppliers for Nestle and issuing certificates, and then energy. Over the course of that strategy refresh, we decided that for the first time ever in Lloyd's Register's history, they would create a CTO office. Which is kind of interesting when you think of kind of a case study around trying to embrace the digital world. And what spawned out of that is the launch of our digital business unit. So again, thinking of inspecting different industrial components, different things, whether it be a pump on a ship or a pump in a processing facility. We want to figure out what sort of data do we have that we're getting from that, and how can we perhaps feed that back to those customers to better improve their operations as well as their maintenance. So with our digital effort, we've kind of launched on the idea of trying to engage with the customers, figure out where they have their shortfalls, where there's room for improving their performance or mitigating risk. Some of the work that we've done, we've seen that mitigating risk with particular clients can add 2 to 3% onto the bottom line, not top line, bottom line. So it's definitely a value, but as has been mentioned before, the idea of quickly ascertaining whether or not a solution will work and then moving on, either embracing it or finding the next one, is pretty critical for us. So we look to rapid product and service innovation and then try and provide those services, again, focused on fit for purpose. I've said that a number of times, but it's quite critical for us. And then launching platforms around that. And you'll see where platforms come in with a couple of later slides. So when we decided to launch on this digital effort, one of the first things we had to do was try and create a digital portfolio. Some of that was to bring certain technologies in-house. Some of that was to partner. And here's an example of one of the very first deals that we did when we launched on this endeavor. RTAMO is a really interesting company that was operating in the North Sea for offshore oil platforms. The gentleman is a subject matter expert, Neil Arthur. He actually started out in services, but he was a pretty sharp guy and thought, you know what, I think if we embrace a couple of bits of technology, we might be able to bring additional value to our clients. And so you can see the number of, or several of the types of clients that we've engaged with. And what we learned from working with RTAMO was that there truly was an overlap between maintenance and operations. How do you know whether or not your maintenance is effective? Well, maybe check with operations, and that will help validate. And of course, anytime you can collect more and more data, the more refined your model will be. So it made sense for us to continue to develop a method to engage on both the operations side as well as the maintenance side. And here you can read a little bit about the history or the benefit of RTAMO. But one of the most exciting parts about that is that through working together and embracing a couple of the use cases that we've seen time and time again, we've been able to lock in on generally a 27% savings for key customers. And to really make this launch meaningful, we have decided to incorporate RTAMO into our new software enterprise platform, which is All Assets. All Assets is really focused on just what I said earlier in terms of bringing operations and maintenance together. We think we can take those 250 years worth of data and be able to create key models. We have teams that can engage with our clientele to, I guess, create from scratch if need be, but ideally they would be able to accelerate their speed to a solution through using one of our already created models. But we're open to either path that serves the client the best. So All Assets Model Builder, it's going to be, it is a library of models that our clients can use, and we think that over the course of time, they'll just continue to get better and better. We do have the benefit of being across a number of different industries. So again, while a pump might be a pump, whether it's on a ship or whether it's in a refinery, the end users really do dictate some key use case scenarios for it. And so we want to make sure that we're able to adapt to that. And with the subject matter experts that we have in those industries, we think that we can do that. But it's kind of exciting that we are just now actually right alongside with this event, we're launching All Assets. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out two colleagues that are here, Oswaldo and Bob. If you guys would raise your hands, they'd be more than happy to talk to you about All Assets as well. They've been putting a lot of time and effort into it. One point that I'm going to throw on here at the end is we do have a number of partners. One of them happens to be here today, QIO. They're an IoT company. And just to give a representation of how we might be able to bring some of All Assets more broadly into different enterprises is we do have a pretty good system for partnering. And in this particular case, I thought QIO made good sense to mention, since you'll be hearing from them here in just a little bit. But we do try and focus in those key areas of trying to increase the performance and mitigate the risk. And with that, happy to talk to anybody a little bit later. Thank you.